In this lecture, I want to talk about an issue, a theological issue, a theological movement, a religion that remains large on our landscape today as evangelical Christians, and that is Islam. And we'll talk about today Islam, Muhammad, and the development of the church, and this in another lecture. And I want to have two shorter lectures, but they will comprise really one topic. But first, let's look at Islam and the church and the dawn of the Middle Ages, which I believe another one of our one of our lectures dealt with. But I want to talk about this just a little more because it's important. Because many times it seems that Christians, what they know about the Middle Ages is they think it was a dark period and we write it off and not much happened. And we kind of fast forward to the dawn of the Reformation with John Huss and others as they start to recover the Bible that led to the Reformation. So we wind up overlooking about 1,000 to 1,500 years, depending on how you measure it, of church history. And it's important. So let's look at the dawn of the Middle Ages, which is important to understand in light of the rise of Islam. When the armies of Islam came marching out of the Arabian desert, a new world was born, you could really say. In the first 600 years after Jesus' death and resurrection, Christianity had set up its victorious banners, as we've seen, across Europe and North Africa and in the Middle East, creating what was called, and what we call today, Christendom. And Christendom simply means the Christian domain, which is a group of nations and territories which, despite political and cultural differences, were united by the fact that Christianity was the public faith of each of them. However, in the 7th century, Christendom suddenly found its most ancient lands being conquered and its civilization supplanted by the fresh, dynamic, and militant religion of a figure named Muhammad. Some historians have argued that this marked the true beginning of the Middle Ages, and perhaps it's so. Of course, this is really only helpful for historians like me as we examine church history and seek to kind of break it up and look at the movements and the theologies and the thought movements that typified this particular age. Of course, we must not think there was any clean or sudden break with the early church period. In the period we call the Middle Ages, it really wasn't like that any more than you could break from the 70s and 80s and 90s and 2010, 11, like that between the decades that the way we try to break it up now, usually in terms of music and movies and that kind of thing. Because people did not wake up one morning and think, well, the Middle Ages begin today. It's January the 1st, 1501 or something like that. So these divisions of time were something we've invented for our own convenience to make the study easier, and I'm sure you're thankful for that. I know that I am. Even so, the Christian world in the 7th century did experience a number of serious changes, which brought an end to one great chapter of Christianity's life story and open another. And really can summarize in three main changes. The first is, as we will enlarge on here, the rise of Islam. This altered forever and echoes into today, of course, forever encompassing today, the way that Christians viewed the world. They would never again look out upon the earth without seeing millions of Muslims. And of course, that movement is growing today, isn't it? The Islamic faith, from its origin to the present day, has always posed the greatest political and military threat and the most awe-inspiring missionary challenge to followers of Jesus Christ. And so we have books and curriculum that is aimed at reaching Muslims, and rightly so. So that was really the first key change. The second one was this: the end of the Monophysite controversy. Now, recall, I think you've read in Gonzalez about the Monophysites. The Monophysites utterly rejected the creed of Chalcedon, what we see as Orthodox Christ, the Orthodox doctrine of Jesus Christ, Orthodox Christology. They argued, the Monophysites argued, there was not two natures of Christ, but one nature. He had one incarnate nature of the Logos, of the Word of God. And so they saw Christ as existing in one nature, the Logos, instead of two, fully God and fully man, as do we. Of course, monos is Greek for one, just breaking down the word here, and physis is Greek for nature, so one nature, the Monophysites. And as long as the largely Monophysite populations of Syria and Egypt were citizens of the Byzantine Empire, their doctrinal quarrel with the Orthodox Chalcedonians was bound to produce political conflict within the Roman Empire and divide the Byzantine Church. So when the forces of Islam conquered Monophysite Syria and Egypt, the controversy between Monophysites and Chalcedonians lost its ability to create theological and political division with Byzantium. It lost its power to affect the West too, really and truly. Remember how at least one pope, Martin I, was martyred for opposing a Byzantine emperor's attempt at compromise with the Monophysites. The mainstream Eastern Church, centered on Constantinople, as you know by now, was now free to pursue other lines of development, troubled no longer by the internal dispute which had torn it apart for now 200 years. So you have the rise of Islam, the end of the Monophysite controversy, and the third key change at this time period was the birth of the Frankish Empire. The 7th century witnessed the rise of Frankish power in the West, reaching its climax in the advent of Charlemagne, and we'll see Charlemagne, a very important figure in early church history. We'll see him in a different lecture. But the advent of rise of Charlemagne, the founding of the Holy Roman Empire in the year 800. So now East and West were divided by both politics and also religion. The Byzantine Empire, and the Patriarch of Constantinople faced a Holy Roman Emperor and the Pope of Rome. And henceforward, the Christian world was in effect now two worlds, divided by culture, government, and of course religious theological issues. So here were sown the seeds which finally bore fruit in the great East-West Schism of 1054, and again we'll see that in a separate lecture. So we have these deep historical changes that were what we might see as landmarks, which ushered Christianity out of the early church period into a new era, the Middle Ages. Ages in the middle, between the patristic age and the age of the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century, which so many of us love and want to fast forward to. But as one college football observer says, not so fast. First came Muhammad and the rise of Islam. Very important, of course, as we know today. In more recent decades, some Western scholars have disputed the traditional account of Muhammad's life, or even his very existence. One serious problem is that no biography of Muhammad was written until roughly 150 years after Muhammad's death. The writer was the scholar Ibn Ishaq. Unfortunately, even Ibn Ishaq's biography has been lost, and we know it only from quotations in still later writings and reference in later writings. However, many non-Islamic sources close to Muhammad's lifetime testify to his historical reality. So he was a real person, I believe, and most historians believe, most evangelicals believe. And so we will look at the account now in the next lecture of Muhammad, his life, and the 5 pillars that comprise the core of Islamic theology.